Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Donna from EGN. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm so happy to see all of you. Please switch on your video so you can see that we are okay. And please click on chat. Yeah, you guys already say hello to each other. And also click on participants so you can see everyone who joining us today. And also please mute at all time unless you wanted to speak. And I can give you one tips. If you wanted to speak while you on mute, you can simply press the space button if you are on your laptop while you're speaking, and then when you're done you just release it. Okay. And also, if you have a comment or if you have a questions for the speaker, or if you have any difficulties, you can chat me privately on the Zoom chat, or you can also just write to the speaker if you have any questions. Okay, now I wanted to invite one and only Managing Director of EGN Singapore, Nick Johnson.
Thanks, Donna, and hi, everyone. I'm so pleased this morning to see that we are now 62 of you have dialed in. I know that the first intention for all of us was we love to meet in person. We want to get out from working from home and meeting, but we kept having the meetings there as long as we could. But now with the new regulations of allowing maximum 10 people, we obviously thought that the most social thing to do is to comply with the government. I was thinking about filing that having these EGN meetings is indeed essential for Singapore and the world economy. We could have filed for this and probably got away with it, but let's all be social responsible. So it's great that you dialed in. Thanks for the music, Donna, and thanks for the dancing and the cheers on a Friday morning in a world that is a little bit challenging. So what I see at the moment is that EGN around the world have stepped up the game. We have more meetings, more events. The members are closer than ever because it is indeed uncertain times out there. But it's very, very important to support each other, to help each other during these times. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit of an update on the upcoming meeting. So I will ask Donna to change to the next slide so I can take you through an update. So next one, Donna. So yeah, I just want to give you some snapshots of what is to come. So we have already on the 9th of April, the 5 things you should do now to safeguard your business against the disruption. So this is by Simon Littlewood, who is our chair for the Finance Leaders Group. He's a writer for The Economist and BBC and so on. So if you're still going through some cost-cutting exercises, he will take you through a few simple steps that could work both for your company and perhaps also for your family. So that one you can just ping Donna if you want to sign up for it if you haven't already. Then on the 17th of April, we have on the nomadic mindset by Kevin. He's a TEDx speaker and a professional speaker. That one will also be as a webinar. And then on the 21st of April, we are how to set up a team and drive remotely during COVID-19. So this is something that I got a request by many of the EGN members. They said, how can we drive the team? How can we motivate them, especially the sales team and so on during these challenging times? And this is Jeremy who will present. He's the #1 global influencer when it comes to the future of work and top 20 global thought leader in the HR space. He will dial in on this webinar from Australia. And that is one of the benefits now. So while before, when we had the physical meetings, we were restricted to people who could visit Singapore and so on. But now Jeremy can visit us online. And so he's one of the best speakers that I think we can find on this topic. So that's on the 21st of April. And then Donna, next one. Then 28th of April, we have on corporate storytelling, the best kept secrets. That's by Dr. Tanvi. So it's about storytelling. And then on 12th of May, we have impactful communication for the C-suite by Glenn, who is the host on Money FM. He's a veteran journalist, so will help you with some tips on communication. Then I thought I should just highlight that on Tuesday, every Tuesday, we have a weekly COVID-10 APAC webinar. It's a very interactive talk, and with APAC means we allow Australia, New Zealand, also Thailand, Hong Kong, and so on to dial in here. You all belong to this group actually in Members Universe, which I will share with you later on. So if you want to join this one, we always start each meeting with a poll to vote what are the topics to cover. I joined the last 2 weeks. There's been some great communication, some good thoughts. How can you keep yourself active when working from home? We talked about also operational challenges and so on. So that's a great tool that you have that you can dial in and support each other. Okay, Donna, next one, please. So yeah, about the EGN Members app, if you don't have it installed now, it's really a tool that you should use. So you can ping Donna on WhatsApp or email. If you don't have it installed, she sends you simple instructions, because Members Universe now, if you sit at your desk, you feel a bit stuck, you have a challenge, you can be rest assured around the members in APAC, we have 500 members in APAC, there will be some members that have the answer for you. So you're not alone during this time. Write the challenge, the question, and help your fellow members with support and guidance as well. You all belong to this COVID-19 group, which is a special group as well on Members Universe. You can unsubscribe from that one if you're not interested. So that's about the Members Universe. And Donna, next one. So that leads us to today's presentation. Indeed, we had booked District for today, and we were planning to have a big event, a booked out space. Andrew has been part of supporting EGN for quite some years. Even before I got involved in Singapore, he was helping my predecessor with the structure and how to do the peer groups in Singapore. I also seen him talk to EGN about 3 years ago at Raffles when we had an event. And I stayed in touch with Andrew over the years here, and even earlier this year, he was also my speaking coach. He helped me, and also on the business side, kept helping to support me with coaching. So I'm really pleased that we managed to turn this around from having an event at District and to get it here online. I see we have now 75 members that have dialed in, and we have no guests today. So I think that is actually a record number in attendance for EGN Singapore. So perhaps that is worth an applause. So thank you everyone for dialing in and supporting EGN, supporting your fellow members, and of course then supporting a fantastic speaker. Andrew is a global influencer on self-leadership and effective leadership. He's an Amazon best-selling author. He is one of the most famous, heavily booked professional speakers in Asia. He's done TEDx. He's spoken for 12,000 people. He is an executive coach, and he's also now doing the program online. For all of us today, it's a new world that we changed everything to online, and Andrew raised his hand. Let's go on with the show. And I'm so pleased, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Andrew. So please, Donna, stop sharing the screen so we can get Andrew's magic on. Thank you, and warm applause for Andrew.
Well, thank you, Nick, and good morning to everybody wherever you are, whether you're in your lounge room or your bathroom or your home office, or you made it to work. I think today I need to start by setting the context. It's unusual for a speaker to come into a situation like this, and I think it'd be inappropriate rather to move into any kind of motivation, inspiration, or even transformation without acknowledging the current situation every single one of us on the planet find ourselves in, and here in EGN. And so let's start with this word unprecedented. And you've heard this used a lot by newscasters around the world, that we are in unprecedented times. Unprecedented means never happened before. Now that's not quite true. It might have never happened before in living memory, but we go back to the 1918 flu epidemic, which is erroneously called the Spanish flu. And we saw the same scenario. So it's not like we cannot turn to history and see what potential outcomes are for this. I do think it's unprecedented in living memory. If you have grandparents that remember World War II, they might talk about living through the Blitz, where the world stopped and we were all in the same boat. Class boundaries disappeared and everybody was in it together. I think that possibly was the closest. For those living in Asia, we remember SARS, but that was perhaps just a test run for what we're facing now. So perhaps it's just unprecedented in terms of just getting our head around it. Over the last month, I've been coaching senior leaders, CEOs, who've been going through the stages of grief from anger and bargaining before they've, can get to acceptance. CEOs who, in January, I did their company kickoff and we had goals and aspirations for the year. And now you have to move into grief because you're not going to hit those targets, certainly not in the first 2 or 3 quarters. And so there's this huge sense of loss just around the fact that most of us on this call are leaders, are target orientated, we're driven to achieve, to go for goals, and now we cannot. And the coaching that I've had to do or am doing is pivoting less to the future and more to how do we deal with the present? How do we deal on a day-to-day basis with the challenges that we're facing, letting people go, working from home, motivating people from a distance that we have not done before. Now, in my experience in both speaking, coaching, facilitating, is that sometimes the issue is one of scale, and we need to bring things into our mind to something that we can get our head around. And my mind goes to Apollo 13. Now here I've chosen a graphic from the movie Apollo 13, which I do believe, as far as I know, is a reasonably accurate representation of what happened to 3 astronauts on their way to the moon when they stirred the oxygen tanks and the oxygen tanks blew, stranding them in a tiny capsule on the way to the moon. I mean, imagine being, we are complaining about lack of space right now. Some of us, I was chatting to somebody yesterday that is quarantined in a tiny 3.5-star hotel room where their commute to their laptop is 0.5 of a second. But put this in context. You're cold, you're worried about oxygen, and completely stranded in space. And I think never before would the requirement for executive presence, the ability to project gravitas confidence under pressure, I think that really showed with these 3 astronauts. And they were communicating with mission control, who said, we're going to work the problem. And I really think that if we're going to talk about self-leadership in times of crisis, we need to talk about how we work the problem, right? The goals have changed. The astronauts are no longer going to the moon. The issue is about getting home alive, and they need to work a problem to do that. And the communication between Houston Command Control and the astronauts is really interesting as you watch that in the movie. And there's that classic scene where they realize that they are running out of CO2 because they are in the landing module, not in the command module, and it's only designed for 2 people. And they literally have to fit a square peg in a round hole because the CO2 scrubbers on the command module are square, and on the landing module, they are round. So they demonstrate self-leadership and executive presence in that point. So let me introduce you to the concept of self-leadership. I have been writing, researching, and speaking on the topic of self-leadership for over 20 years. And in 2012, I published a book with Dr. Anna Kazan, and we defined self-leadership as the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions to achieve your objectives. Now let's just deconstruct that a little bit. It's a practice. Like taking a shower is a practice. We need to do it on a daily basis, even if we're working from home, right? It is a practice, right? Staying clean is not permanent. The great Zig Ziglar said that taking a shower is like motivation, or motivation is like taking a shower. The effect is not permanent. So we need to practice self-leadership. I'm a self-leadership coach, sometimes called a self-leadership guru. Do I have to practice it? Yes. In these dark days that we've been experiencing, I've had to deal with my own self-awareness and my dark side and feelings of frustration and anger myself. And it's a practice of influencing our thinking and feeling. Notice it doesn't say controlling our thinking and feeling, right? We think, we feel, and sometimes we're an observer of our thoughts and our emotions. Our emotions often have us. And as an observer as our emotions, we can ask ourselves the question, is this useful? Is this supporting me? Is being depressed or angry, is it supporting me to be in the best state I need to be to deal with what I need to deal with today? So we practice influencing what we're thinking, influencing our emotions to achieve our objectives. Now, in the current scenario, I think our objectives are very different. I think we have to have an objective not to self-sabotage. Right? Our own anger and frustration, if we share that as leaders to our families, to our colleagues, to our employees, we are doing nobody a favor. Panic spreads faster than the virus. So in this time, more than ever, it is my belief that self-leadership is essential. And that's why I think this is a timely presentation. When I first spoke with Nick, we spoke about me talking about self-leadership and digital disruption, because we are facing a huge crisis in terms of how we handle AI machine learning. But I've adjusted this talk speech session to work through the fact that you need to be a self-leader in times of crisis and stop the self-sabotage. Now, as I said, we are all human beings and we're going to face these. Very, senior leaders that I coach are struggling, are really having to face their own inner demons around this. And so I think a maxim that I have been speaking about for as long as I can remember is that you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. I think you would agree with me on that. I hope you would agree with me on that. And that the first place to look is in the mirror, right? It's easy to complain about everybody else, but the first place that we can influence, of course, is our own attitude. When I was a young man, I read Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was an intern of a Nazi prisoner of war camp. He was destined for death as a Jew. And he realized that the last of all human freedoms is the freedom to choose our own attitude. And so before we lead others, we need to lead ourselves. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to shift to slide share, and you should be able to see my slides here. And I want to take you through some aspects of self-leadership and executive presence as it pertains to our current scenario. So let's look at a self-leadership model. This is from my 2016 book, the one that became an Amazon bestseller, and I'm going to make that available to you as a PDF at the end of this presentation. I have an offer for you on that to make that almost free. And so you'll see this model, and you'll see that there's an inner game and an outer game. The inner game is our intentionality to influence ourselves. And the outer game is how we influence others and impact towards the targets that we set. And you'll see that there's three cogs to the inner game: our self-awareness. And self-awareness is directly correlated with effective leadership. Effective leaders have high self-awareness. Now, a lack of self-awareness is often or is correlated with levels of narcissism. Now, narcissism, like all psychological disorders, is a scale, and we're all a little bit on the scale. We all have a little bit of narcissism. Typically, if we reach a leadership position, we have a little bit more than most. But if you have high narcissistic tendencies, you have low self-awareness and have a difficulty in adjusting to an external world that doesn't meet your internal world. So self-leaders have high self-awareness. Good leaders have high self-awareness. Self-confidence is very important. We have to be confident in our abilities, and that's based on our past and our current abilities. As opposed to the third cog, which is self-efficacy. And this is the most important thing. You see, none of us can confidently say we've been through this before. We might have been through SARS. We might have been through business disruption. I've been through the global financial crisis. I've been through a divorce. I've been through life-threatening health issues. There's a number of things that have given me confidence that I have the resilience to get through this. But what we all need right now is self-efficacy, the self-belief that we will get through this, that whatever happens, we will be able to make the adjustments and get through this. When we have a good inner game, then that influences our outer game. And this is why you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. Now, the interesting thing here is that the self-leader is because they have self-awareness, is constantly closing the gap between their actions and the goal. Like sailing a boat across a lake or a river, you set a target, but the wind and obstacles and the waves mean that you need to constantly adjust the rudder. So you're constantly taking feedback, or you're feed forwarding in that you're looking at the compass and you're seeing where that is. Now, these two things, we can use the words interchangeably. Feed forward was coined by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, named world's #1 leadership coach, good friend of mine. And he talked about feed forward, that effective people are reaching out and saying, well, what do I need to do to adjust? And so you, by being on this call today, observing this webinar, are saying, what do I need to do to adjust? So congratulations, you're already demonstrating a level of self-leadership. And just like narcissism, self-leadership is on a scale. There are days when we have very high self-leadership, and there are days when it all goes to hell and we hit the drinks cabinet, right? So just to understand that. Now, around feed forward, I have an acronym that's easy to remember. It's 3 A's: accept, adjust, and advance. And as I talked about the stages of grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote extensively about this. We start with denial and bargaining and anger, but eventually with grief, we reach acceptance that what has happened has happened. And as leaders going through this crisis, the sooner we can accept the reality of the new normal, the quicker we can adjust our behaviors and our communications so we can again advance towards our objectives. Does that make sense? Accept, adjust, advance. And so you can have some self-awareness where you are on this model right now, because you all know whether you've been having those issues. So as I previously said, you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. This scenario, this situation is testing your ability to project your gravitas, your substance, your confidence, and your poise under pressure. It's now more important than ever to project executive presence, which I've defined as to project gravitas, confidence, and poise under pressure. So a quick self-check. Are you doing that? Are you projecting these things? So important. Now, let's talk about it from an organizational perspective. Over the last 20 plus years, I've worked with lots of organizations. I've thrown a few logos up here, really, I guess, to just establish credibility and maybe connect with a few of you who work for these companies. I first came to Asia in 2004 with Singapore Airlines, not just on Singapore Airlines, but putting their leadership and coaching program in. And I've worked with major organizations. And obviously I can't share exact case studies with some of them, they're confidential. So let's use a case study of the absence of self-leadership. And I'm going to pick Microsoft in 2013, 2014. Now I can't see the chat box just at the moment, so I don't know if anybody is actually an employee of Microsoft, but I was consulting to Microsoft during these Steve Ballmer times. And Microsoft was in a mess for a number of reasons. It had a fragmented culture and it was crippling innovation, and that put the company in stasis. I was asked to help employees use the stack ranking system, which was a bell curve, which actually pitted one employee against another. And you were forced to rank people instead of acknowledging each person on their issues. And we see the evidence of that. The feedback was really clear, with Ballmer at 29% on Glassdoor, with Larry Page at 94% and Zuckerberg at that point at a high 99%. The tech was in the toilet, and as Ballmer actively opposed any kind of open source culture, calling Linux a cancer, the industry such as Gartner said he was short-sighted and gave Microsoft only 3 years at that time. Now, in terms of open source, giving stuff away, Red Hat proved them to be incorrect. Now, all of this changed when Satya Nadella took over. Satya Nadella used a self-leadership approach. Now, I wish I could tell you that I was Satya's coach through this period. I was not. Maybe the fact that we share a haircut is the is the resonation. Thatcher's own life experience taught him to be a self-leader. In fact, if you read his autobiography, it was having a child with disabilities that taught him to listen. He listened to the people. He looked outside. He did feed forward. He realized that the culture at the top of Microsoft was old and stayed in the old ways, and it needed fresh ideas. Microsoft had acquired the makers of Minecraft. Those of you with teenage kids will know what Minecraft is. And so he invited these guys to the Microsoft company offsite, even though they didn't technically qualify. And their new ideas in terms of being digital ready and online changed the mindset of Microsoft. And as we know, Microsoft is now a $1 trillion valuation, or it was before the recent stock market adjustments. I haven't checked if this is still a fact. So Microsoft came behind and changed the culture by listening to the people. Now, I mentioned earlier Red Hat. I've also consulted to Red Hat, particularly here in Asia. And here I am working with the head of sales enablement, Phil. And Red Hat has always had an open source culture. They gave away Linux and they made their money with a software as a service model and were so successful in middleware that they were acquired by IBM. And there's some interesting times now where IBM's culture and Red Hat culture are very different, but IBM are being very smart and understanding that they shouldn't change an open culture where people are very agile in their thinking. So how does that work? Right? How does this agile thinking work? Because the challenge is to get both leaders and followers to be more agile in their thinking and action to be self-leaders. So for me to add value today, it's one thing to say, let's have self-leadership, but I know that this particular forum, you like the how-tos. How do we do this? Now, I also know that some of you are HR background and you love a model, and this 2x2 model is from my 2012 book, which means my 2012 book on self-leadership gets used on MBA programs. Little personal brag, if I may. I took my MBA way back in 1999, and I was arguing with my organizational leadership professors, and I kept arguing and saying, I don't agree, this isn't pragmatic. And one of them said, Andrew, you got some good ideas, go write your own book. And that was published in 2012, and this is a model from that. So this is my little humble brag for that. But let me explain this model to you. It's very simple. There's the vertical axis, whether we are as a leader by style, directive, telling, or participative, asking. Is the culture of the organization directive, hierarchical, or is it very open source, asking, and agile? But then we need to look at the horizontal axis, which shows the people's level of responsibility, their autonomy, their self-rule. How good are they at taking that ownership? Because if you, and many of you are Western leaders who move to Asia, where sometimes the autonomy is not as high. Now, I'm awfully cautious about using cultural stereotypes, but it is a realization. You know, sometimes we see, Singapore is sometimes called a compliant culture. People, are respectful of authority, right? So if people aren't used to taking their own decisions, then they tend to have low autonomy. And so we tend to have to be directive in those environments, because if people are not taking ownership and you are very high participative, you won't get results. Quick story. When I first arrived in Singapore in 2003, I jumped in a taxi. You've all had this experience. I jumped in a taxi and said where I wanted to go. It was the hotel I was staying at. And the taxi driver asked me, which way do you want to go? Now, having originally lived in London, I'm like, what? You are the transportation professional. How is it that you don't know which way to go? I said, oh, I know which way to go. I just want you to tell me so I don't get scolded. And I'm like, scolded? And I realized that meant told off, right? So in terms of his experience, he was not exercising autonomy because he had had directive leadership from the back seat. Now, if we want to move into an ownership situation, we need to make sure that we expand our participativeness, asking at a rate and speed that we encourage people to take ownership. So let's use a couple of avatars, what that looks like. what does somebody with ownership looks like? So this is Sam, okay? Obviously an avatar. I've constructed Sam as an amalgamation of self-leaders. And Sam practices self-leadership. So Sam is confident, creative, willing to try new things. Sam takes ownership of her work and seeks feedback on how she can improve, right? So she's practicing the model. She's practicing confidence. She's got high intentionality, and she's taking that ownership. She's using the feed forward method and saying, how can I be better, right? Now, I hope all of you have Sams on your team. This is Dominic. Dominic doesn't practice self-leadership. Again, it's a stock photo. There is no such person as Dominic, but I think we've met Dominic. You see, Dominic only does what he's told to do. He plays the victim and blames everybody else for his lack of results. So I think we've experienced the Dominics, and I know which we prefer. Now, the question is, can you move a Dominic to a Sam? Now, when we look at organizations, typically we look at the hierarchy. Now, the move to an open organization is to flatten this pyramid as much as possible. But we all recognize individual contributors, middle management, senior leaders, right? We know where the worst place to be, of course, is, and it's in the middle. Now, if we look at an organizational culture, self-leadership ideally is a top-down process. That the leaders, the CEO, the senior leadership team practice ownership, they practice self-leadership, and they communicate the vision and the culture, and they live that culture. They demonstrate it through their behaviors. The middle management engage by co-creating goals and giving feedback and support. Notice I say co-creating. In these times, telling people this is our goal, as opposed to saying, this is the problem, let's work the problem together, right? Remember the three astronauts. Individual contributors need to take ownership of their thinking, feeling, and actions for their own personal and career development. They should be saying, hey, what do I need to do to move up to the next level in the organization? Am I projecting confidence and gravitas and poise under pressure? So this is the organizational model. I'm going to stop in a little while for Q&A. I see a few things popping on the chat. As I said, while I share the screen, I'm not able to see the chat at the moment. I will have a look at that in a moment, but still keep popping your questions up. I will stop for Q&A. I imagine with these two model slides that will be something that you want to ask questions about. And finally, I think it's my final or near final slide before I open up for Q&A. Is that when we look at leadership, I mean, there are so many books on leadership, and I have been studying leadership, practicing leadership, coaching leadership for 20 plus years. You know, when I now stand as a professor on an MBA program and talk about leadership, there are so many leadership models. And what I like to do is use a leadership algorithm. And I've taken this from path goal theory from Martin and House back in the 1970s and adapted it and said, look, there's an algorithm of leadership. There are three things that always happen. The leader style, or the leadership style of the leader, the people's motivation and skill, and the environment or the context. Now, in a stable environment where the people are highly trained and highly motivated, the leader's style is obviously participative and consultative. If you are directive to intelligent people, they don't like it. If you are directive to high self leaders, they don't like it and they will leave, right? But if the environment is incredibly uncertain, complex, people are not skilled in this new areas, people are in shock or in grief, then the leader does actually need to use directive leadership style for a period of time. The example that I use for this is if we're on an airplane, the oxygen mask does fall from the ceiling. Smoke swirls around your ankles. The captain comes out of the cockpit and says, ladies and gentlemen, got a bit of a problem. Let's create some focus groups and let's see what we should do about this. Now, if you're a passenger on that plane, you would be, well, I think even the atheists would get religion on that plane right there, because we want directive leadership. We want people to tell us what to do. The challenge is that unfortunately, when directive leadership is taken, it often takes time for it to release. And I really do not want to verge into politics right now, but reading the futurists in terms of post-COVID-19, we're going to see a lot of directive leadership. Here in Singapore, I think we're an exemplar to the world in terms of how the Singapore government has taken control. But I have an app on my phone, and probably you do, that allows the government to know where I am relative to a hotspot. I have given away my privacy in exchange for safety. And I think what we all need to be thinking about as individual citizens, wherever we are in the world, is taking that ownership back at some point. But that's perhaps a conversation for another day. Now, with that directiveness, when you go into a directive leadership style, you think you need compliance, right? If you think about the chessboard, right? Each of the pieces of the chessboard can represent how we react. In my 2012 book, I take you through this exercise. Which piece on a chessboard are you? Are you a pawn? Are you a powerless? Are you likely to be sacrificed, right? Or are you a knight? You're entrepreneurial. You jump ahead of everybody else with new ideas, right? Are you the rook or the castle? You are very into standard operating procedures, risk averse, maybe into audit, right? Are you the bishop, which is cutting corners diagonally across the board? Are you the queen, multitasking, helping everybody else, but forgetting to help yourself? Or are you the king with narcissistic tendencies and not helping anybody else? So, we have a number of issues here, right? How do we do this? And this slide, of course, was when I talk about moving to a digital economy and how we deal with technology and people and culture. As we are going through these changes, people are working from home. This will be the new norm, right? So how do we motivate people? How do we keep them creative? How do we keep them adding value as they move through this, right? So these are the things that you're going to deal. Because today, if we want a robot, we can build a robot. So if you or your people are just doing repetitive behavior with little or no thinking or self-leadership, then it will be cheaper to replace you and your people with a robot or an algorithm. So you may not want to hear this, or maybe you do, but COVID-19 is going to accelerate the digital disruption. It's going to create huge disparity in workforces between those that are digitally intelligent, savvy, and those that are not. So we are going to have, a huge differentiation, and it's going to be driven by this. Today, if you're watching me, you have an internet connection, a Zoom account, you're able to connect with other professionals, you are lucky and you should be grateful for this. Yes, I know the tragedy is going to impact each and every one of us. We're all going to know somebody that's impacted by this, if you don't already. But we do need to move from the current to the future very quickly, and that's what's going to happen. So by developing self-leaders or a self-leadership culture, you no longer need to have to, and there's a terrible typo on this, I'm so sorry. You no longer need to waste time with motivation and oversight. They will come up with ideas and innovations, making the company more competitive. This challenges the frame of the whole organization. I've heard some great stories of people organizing digital happy hours and quizzes to make sure that everybody is staying connected. So that is awesome. So I need to find my controls. I'm going to stop my share, and that should put me back front and center and to doing what I need to do here. And so we're in the Q&A phase of this. Let me have a look at, maybe Nick, can you unmute yourself? Was there any big questions that you saw on the chat that I need to answer first?
Yes, Andrew, I can see some of the questions have been coming in here. So I think the first question that was posted, let me just try to see, go back in the thread. It was from Subash. We would like to know, do you see that one there? Which company?
No, I'm relying on you. I could scroll up and down, but relying on you. You saw it. Which one did you see? From
Subash. At 9:04 a.m.
Oh, that helps. Hi, Subhash. Would like to know which company, according to him, projects all aspects of leadership in today's context. Oh, that's a trick question, Subhash. I think everybody is on a continuum. I think everybody's doing good and bad things. And I don't know the inside of every organization. I did name drop Red Hat, which is the company that's doing virtual happy hours and quizzes. Their leaders are checking in with people because they're really happy. Sorry, not happy. They're really used to the dialogue in terms of how they work, right? And it's a software company. You know, they're digitally enabled, and so it's easy. I'm seeing posts on my LinkedIn saying, hey, you know, I worked my tail off for this company. I nearly said something rude then. I've worked my tail off for this company, and then they just let me off, right? So some organizations are actually increasing the pay for their employees right now, and some are laying people off. Now, remember the global financial crisis where the banks laid off huge amounts of people. Anybody who was a private banker knows that all the private bankers got laid off, and then the moment it kicked back in, everybody was rehiring private bankers at twice the cost of what they laid them off. So I really, Subhash, would, regret. I used to use Tiger Woods as a great example of somebody that, applied coaching, and then Tiger Woods got himself into a newsworthy situation with a lady, and suddenly, it was inappropriate to use Tiger as an example. And the moment I use a company as an example, somebody's going to do something bad. So I think you need to look at the individual behaviors of organizations rather than say, this is the only one, or this is the best. So I'm sorry I sat on the fence on that question. Shall I just read down the questions then, Nick? What's the next one?
Yeah, sure. You can take the ones that you like there, Andrew. There's some there about the leadership style.
Okay, can I use a case study? Yes, I can. So in January this year, I was at a company kickoff, and that company kickoff was for a CEO who I've known for 20 years. This CEO was my first CEO coaching client. Now, there are a lot of coaches out there. Coaching has grown dramatically. I've been coaching probably because I coached sports teams. I was a physiotherapist by first iteration. I've been coaching since the late 1980s. But I've been an executive coach since 1999. And one of the first CEO I coached was a very directive leader. He was an ex-banker, created a software startup. He had low emotional control. He, very passionate and emotional individual. So if he was angry, everybody knew he was angry. If he was unhappy, everybody knew he was unhappy. Big guy, strong voice, super smart, super confident, which meant none of his team spoke up and none of his team challenged him. And when I became his coach, I said, how's this working out for you, right? How much in terms of creative ideas are you getting? And he said, well, I don't have creative people. I said, but you don't know. You're never giving them a chance to step up. And I taught him to just think about, borrowing from Edward de Bono, thinking about different hats. Are you the pilot in a crisis? Are you having to say, we have a company crisis, you need to do this. I don't have time to explain, do this. Or are you wanting to bring out the best of a team? Are you maybe the lead doctor of a medical team and you want to solve a problem? And you need to hear from your best minds. And that's participative. And so using that model that I've said between the leader style and the environment, how do you adapt? He adapted. That team grew. I coached both him and his sales team. He IPO'd that company in the USA. He was acquired by the company that who took the majority shares. He moved to another company. He became a very sought after CMO in Silicon Valley, and then a bunch of venture capitalists acquired him, parachuted him into an organization, which I did the company kickoff. So 20 years I've known this leader on and off. He's hired me as a coach in different roles. And he is just an exemplar of self-leadership now. He is so self-aware. He has great emotional control. Yes, he still has those emotions, but nobody else needs to know about them. You know, if he needs to vent, he gives me a call, or he has a team around him, and he is leading very, very proactively through this. All right? And so, you know, having seen the growth of this individual and the growth of myself as a coach and the experience I've had through this, it's a great exemplar. Moving down, how do we guide people to make a journey from not being a self-leader to a self-leader? It's kind of the same question. So here's the thing, right? It's about ownership, right? So when we're kids, around about 3 years old, we develop a sense of ownership. And all of those of you who are parents recognize this when your kid said, "It's mine," right? You know, somebody else touched a toy and they said, "It's mine," you know, almost, right? Demonically, you know, so that your cute little kid is mine. This is the beginning of ownership. Unfortunately, culturally, we get disavowed of ownership because we get told to share, right? And what this does is it represents people who can't say no to anything, right? Can't say no, right? Because I have to share. Somebody asks me, I have to share. Now, to be a healthy adult, we have to have boundaries between me and not me, right? My thoughts, my feelings, my words and actions. Remember, self-leadership is influencing our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. So we have to take ownership. So the absence of ownership is blame. Oh, he did this. I had to do this because he said so. Or, you know, there is no ownership. Or victim. Oh, I have no control. It's terrible. So when we see blaming and victim, we have the absence of ownership. So in coaching people to be self-leaders, what is it that they own, or what is it that they are responsible for? Now, they are only responsible for their thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. They're not responsible for others' thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. In fact, what other people think about me is none of my business. Now, if you said that, could you say it? What other people think about me is none of my business? Or do you think, oh, no, it matters what other people think about me? And we lose ownership the moment we care about what others think about us. Now, reputation management is important. I would like you to think nice things about me, but I can't control it. I'm not responsible for it. I'm responsible for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, and I'm accountable to my values. Right? I want to do a good job today. You know, when Nick reached out to me, I said, "Yeah, sure." Right? Nick and I have a friendship and a collaboration, so there's an accountability. So I'm not responsible for Nick. Nick is not responsible for me. I said I would be here today and present, and therefore I'm accountable to that. If I have a boss, I'm accountable to that boss in terms of the agreements we made, right? And in my relationship, that's my wife, right? I'm accountable to the marriage vows. I'm not responsible for her. If she gets angry or upset, she's angry or upset. Those are her emotions, not my emotions, her emotions. But I'm accountable to her in terms of the values. Now, making this distinction for our employees, asking our employees, what are you responsible for? Remember Sam, right? Sam took ownership. Have Sam's. That's how you do it. Clearly articulating, these are your responsibilities and these are your accountabilities. Now, I know in English, we use those two words interchangeably. I know in other languages, there's not an easy distinction between ownership versus accountability. But to the best of your knowledge, make sure, because if you're taking responsibility for your people, you are parenting. And parenting is dysfunctional. Do not parent your employees. They're grown-ups, right? Now, we parent our children because they're not yet old enough to take full responsibility. If I don't check on my kids with their homework, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They're teenagers, so they're moving into accountability, but they're not fully there yet. And so as we move our employees into ownership and autonomy, right, we have to see how much ownership have they taken. The moment they blame or they victimize or become a victim, you have to call them out on that. And that's how you create the shift. Thomas, starting there was one pragmatic thing you would recommend this group to do in order to improve the self-leadership journey. Accept. Remember the acronym I did. Accept, adjust, advance. You have to accept that this is a new reality. Right? The sooner we get to acceptance, the sooner we can adjust our behaviors. Right? So this is the practical, and helping as many people around us to accept and take responsibility for that which they can. If the only thing they can take ownership for is their attitude. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. The last of all human freedoms is the freedom to choose our own attitude, right? And that doesn't mean we all have to be happy and super happy. I mean, as I said, I opened up this presentation with acknowledging this is unprecedented, right? And accepting that we have emotions of grief through this, that we are going to be distracted by loved ones being infected or ourselves being infected. Right? We're going to face those fears. So accepting, acknowledging those, then adjusting our behaviors and moving forwards. I think that's the biggest one. All righty. Does the self-leadership interface with the situational leadership framework? If so, share now. Now, the situational leadership framework, Hersey and Blanchard, is a 1970s model which says that you change your leadership depending on the situation. The principle of that model is exactly the same as what I'm saying around 3 leadership. The actual labels of the 4 boxes of that model are, in my opinion, outdated. In fact, what they call coaching in the situational leadership model from Hersey and Blanchard would now be called performance management, because it has a directive nature to it. So the model's labels need to be updated, but the concept that we as leaders have to assess the situation and our leadership style. If you're an academic, the best research on this, or the best model around this, is contingency leadership. And in contingency leadership, it really looks at how our leadership style interfaces with how people respond to us as leaders. So if you want to do a deep dive, the situational leadership model by Hersey and Blanchard it's a 4-box model, and we all love 2x2 models. I met Ken Blanchard, and lovely guy. I just think, it was a model for a slightly different time. We need some more agility and flexibility on the way we think about leadership. So that's my answer around that one. All right. Sorry if I get into the academia around it. All right. So let me throw it back to Nick. I have one more share for you before I end. But Nick, do you want to just do a quick round for any last questions before I share again?
Andrew, thank you very much for taking the questions so far. I just made a last round for call for questions. So you perhaps skim through them if there's something there. Do you want to share first and then we do the last questions, or do you want to take them right away?
I'll just take the last one, because when I close, I want to close with a story for all of us. I will stay online after you officially close the meeting. If anybody has any final questions, I'll stay on for a little bit longer.
I have a question there, Andrew, which I think is also something that we at EGN like to hear the answer, and I think many of us, and what I heard in the last week is that suddenly the move online goes for everybody. For us, we have the meeting now with 83 participants online, and for many others, the teams are working online. Everyone is working from home. And someone was telling me this week, it's almost like we jumped 1 decade. The future of work arrived overnight, but we've been talking about for so much time. We had so much objections to it. We didn't want to do it. Today, we are forced to do it. And I have to say that today, I know there's 10, 20 of the EGN members who refuse to go online. They said, I will never, ever go to an online meeting. It's not what I do. But I'm so pleased to see that a majority have adopted so quickly. And that is the world we're in. So that links me to the question there that Joe mentioned. You can see it at 9:22 there in the feed.
Okay. Sorry. Not COVID, just a sore throat. Another humble brag. Apparently I just got voted number 35 global thought leader on the future of work, which I don't know how that happened. So that was from 360 something or other. I was pleasantly surprised that was the label they gave me, because I've been saying for a long time, the future of work is a misnomer. It's now. There is no, we are living the future of work, right? So wake up and smell the coffee is my response to that. And as much as I'm going to upset people perhaps saying it, I don't think we jumped a decade. I think this was already happening. I pivoted into online coaching in 2016. I used to coach people by phone around the world. I am very good at listening for their change in breathing when they weren't speaking, you know, to make sure they hadn't dropped off the line when they were reflecting from a coaching question. I did my first online trainings in 2017, and this enabled me to be global. I have clients here from Singapore to Silicon Valley, and I'm used to doing this kind of interaction. So, you know, am I a futurist? No, I just recognize, but I'm not the only one that was doing it. I actually think this is a level playing field. I think it's a great opportunity for those that are not in central office, right? There's a recency bias or a locality bias that if you're next to the decision makers, you're physically in the room, you have greater influence and sway. And if you were working remote here in Southeast Asia, for instance, I mean, I remember when working with Microsoft, you know, if it didn't come from Redmond, it didn't count. And yet we were creating great ideas here in Asia. I wrote an Influence Without Authority program for Microsoft way back when. And, you know, I had to compete with Redmond because they already had one. And even though the program we wrote was better. Now, again, I sound like that's a humble brag, but the reality was that was the case. Now, anybody that's competent working remotely, and particularly who have executive presence. Now, self-leadership leads into executive presence. And you need to have executive presence through a webcam. Right? I'm looking straight down the barrel of my webcam at you. I'm comfortable in this medium. I'm not actually an extrovert, but I'm pumping up my energy to push it through because I want to influence you to take action. Now, all of you introverts who previously said we are disadvantaged because we don't like the boardroom, we don't like the big meeting. Hello, you can work from home. All you need to do is crank up your energy for that meeting and bingo, you're on a level playing field. Build your executive presence now. All right, so this is a strong message for everybody who wants to step up into leadership. Now, if you are a leader and you're leading a team and you're not used to this technology, realize that this technology is transactional, but it can be transformational. There's another leadership model, Byrne, 1984, I think, the transactional versus transformational leadership. The transactional leader sets goals, monitors the goals. The transformational leader creates a culture where people can step up, take ownership, and the transformational leader treats each person as an individual. As a leader now, you need to be transformational, checking in with your people, and possibly have a call that's just about how are you, how's your family, how are you coping with this? I don't want to talk about goals. I don't want to talk about business. I want to just check in and see how you are. What can we do as an organization to support you right now? And this is what I'm coaching the leaders that I'm working with right now to do, because that's what people need right now. And I was reminded of this last week. A coachee of mine said, you know, I'm trying to be the leader that my boss was not during the global financial crisis. I was not a leader in 1985, 84, 85. And my leader was very transactional, do this. And when he wasn't telling me, he was absent. The leader today with virtual teams is present. And even through this technology, reaching out and connecting with people. I've talked to so many people in the last couple of weeks who are having better relationships with their parents through Zoom than they did before this happened, because they're making the effort to connect, get their parents on Zoom, make sure everybody's all right because they're social distance. 2 of my children are not with me right now because we're in separate households. They are children from a previous marriage. They were supposed to come over to me. They cannot, but I'm making sure I'm connecting with my children through technology. They have no problem with that. So here are some pragmatic things. And I would say they're not on this call, so they're not going to care what I say and what I say to them. The people who say, I will never be on this are dinosaurs. I mean, honestly, they are dinosaurs. I'm sorry. I don't know who they are. I don't know who I'm offending. But the truth, you know, I mean, the one thing about COVID-19 is facts trump beliefs, right? And there's a huge amount of humor in just that statement, that facts trump beliefs, right? COVID-19 doesn't care what you believe. Doesn't care your nationality, your ethnicity, your gender, your religious persuasion, your sexual persuasion. It doesn't care. It's a fact. So I don't care what these people believe. The fact is it's here. The fact is this is working. You did an amazing job, Nick, and Donna getting 77 people on this. So awesome. So I'm going to make that the last question. I want to share I promised something to you. Just give me 1 second while I kick this back into slide again. Share this. Good. So obviously I had a little while to share with you. I basically want to give you something for free. It's not totally free because I need to cover some costs. The Self-Leadership Accelerator is a 6-session coaching program that comes with a PDF of my best-selling book on self-leadership. You can access that by going to selfleadership.com/SLA. Nick, if you would just put that in the chat box for me. I'm sharing, and for some reason the chat box is disappearing when I'm sharing. Why is that happening? Can I get it back? Oh no, I can get it back. Hang on a moment, I can do that. Now, so it's in full transparency. There's a $7 US admin fee, but I mean, this is a $97 product that I'm giving away. I highly recommend you get that. Even if it's not for you, give it away to somebody else. So that's selfleadership.com/SLA. That's $7. When you do that, there will be an upsell, full transparency, to my executive presence coaching program that has 6 systems to develop your executive presence. Never before has that been more important, to develop your executive presence through a webcam, to get the right frames, to build your confidence, learn to influence, to get results, really unleash your executive presence, and an opportunity for you to move into the C-suite. So if you go to first, you can have either or, and those are 2 things that I've given away almost for nothing to EGN. And I want to finish. I've got a couple of minutes, I think. Let me just finish with a story, because normally I'm an inspirational speaker, and today I've had to be very pragmatic, very teaching. And I think it's narratives that change us. And you'll see this beautiful picture of some African kids. And the story is of an anthropologist who was studying these kids and the village culture. And he hung some fruit from a tree and in a basket. And he said to the kids, okay, let's race. Whoever gets to the tree first gets the fruits. And I think there was some sweets mixed in with those. And so he said, ready, steady, go. And the kids joined hands and walked to the tree, took the fruit bowl down, and sat around in a circle and shared it. The Western anthropologist was, of course, surprised. He said, why didn't you run? Why didn't you run? If one of you won, you'd have got all of the fruit and sweets. And the kids said, Ubuntu. And he said, what does that mean? He said, well, how could one of us be happy if everybody else was sad? Ubuntu is a Xhosa word that translates as, I am because we are. And I think the reality that we have today is that we have been goal-driven capitalists, always going for that competitive nature. What COVID-19 is clearly demonstrating to us is I am because we are. As a human race, we have missed so many opportunities. When Apollo 8 went around the moon and we saw for the first time Earthrise, we saw this planet, we should have realized one tribe, one planet, one future. This disaster of COVID-19 is going to bring out community. And I celebrate your EGN community that together you are. Thank you very much. My name is Andrew Bryant, and this is how you connect with me. I will stay online and answer questions in the chat box. Nick, I'm going to stop my share. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, anybody, and over to you, everybody.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. And now we're going to try one thing. I'm going to do a countdown for all of you from 5, where we're going to, when we 5, 4, 3, and so on. When I come to 1, I want you all to unmute yourself and give a huge, random, loud applause and cheer for Andrew. So let's try that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for taking us through this, to helping us come a little bit closer to acceptance, which is what we need so badly in these times. And thanks for starting a Friday morning with some cheer. And it's amazing to see 80 familiar faces connecting online. We've done this switch overnight. Let's continue and support each other during this time. You can trust that from EGN, we will be closer to you than ever before. And you have an open line to myself and to my team. You can message Donna and myself afterwards on WhatsApp, or give us a call if you have some feedback. How can we improve for the future? How can we support you more in these times? Because that's what a community like EGN is what we all need now. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. And if the formal session have ended now, we will stay on informally if someone to have an informal chat here afterwards. But thank you so much. Have an awesome Friday. Bye-bye.